My name is Lowell. I'm not sure when I stopped being the man she loved. Only that, by the time I noticed, she had already learned how to smile at me without meaning it. The morning of our divorce hearing, I sat in my car for almost an hour before going in. Not because I had doubts, or because I was hoping she'd change her mind and call it off. No, I just didn't want to be the first one in the room. I didn't want to be the guy sitting alone, waiting, looking nervous. I didn't want her to walk in and see what all of this had done to me. How tired I looked. How thin I'd gotten. Funny how heartbreak doesn't show up in obvious ways. There's no bleeding, no broken bones. Just this slow hollowing out, like someone has been quietly scraping away at your insides with a spoon. When I finally stepped inside, the courtroom was cold. Not cold like winter, cold like a hospital. Too clean, too quiet. The kind of quiet where even your breathing feels like an interruption. And then I saw her. Sylvie. She wore a light blue blazer, and her hair was pulled back in that way she always used to do when she wanted to look put together. But I knew her well enough to recognize the small things. The stiffness in her shoulders. The way she kept her chin slightly raised, like she was holding her breath emotionally. But what I didn't expect, what hit me hardest, was her laugh. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was quiet, almost polite. The kind of laugh you give someone at a dinner party when they make a joke that doesn't quite land. She wasn't even looking at me. She was whispering something to her attorney, and that little laugh floated across the room like a punch wrapped in velvet. I know it sounds stupid, but that laugh broke something in me. It told me exactly where we stood. Not just legally, emotionally. That whatever pain I was holding on to, she wasn't holding any of it. Not anymore. She wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She was done. And me? I was still trying to find the pieces of a marriage that only existed in my memory. I sat down quietly, said nothing, just nodded when the clerk explained how things would go. My lawyer, Donovan, a quiet guy, maybe a little too soft-spoken for this kind of work, leaned over and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine. But I wasn't. Because you know what's worse than being hated? Being irrelevant. That's what her laugh told me. That I had become background noise. A chapter closed. A sweater she once loved and eventually gave away without a second thought. And yet, I didn't walk out. I stayed. I listened. I signed what needed to be signed. Because I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. But I had one moment left. Something I hadn't told anyone about. Not Donovan. Not my brother. Not even Sylvie. And when the time came, when the final question was asked, I stood up, loosened my tie, and quietly unbuttoned my shirt. What I revealed underneath wasn't shocking in the way people might imagine. It wasn't a scar or a tattoo or a statement meant for her. But the moment that shirt came off, the air in that courtroom changed. People stopped moving. Sylvie's expression changed for the first time all morning. And for once, finally, she wasn't laughing. I never thought taking off a shirt would feel like setting down a decade of silence. They say you can know someone's soul by what they carry on their body. Maybe that's true. But I didn't unbutton those cuffs to prove anything to Sylvie. I did it because I needed a moment that belonged only to me. Something real in a room full of polite detachment and procedural language. Underneath, taped to my skin, was a folded piece of fabric. Just cotton, faded and soft. One of the old t-shirts she used to sleep in. Back when we still shared sleep and not just space. I'd kept it, not out of some desperate nostalgia, but because of what it had come to mean to me. It was the shirt she wore the night we signed the lease on our first apartment. I remember she danced around the empty living room with her arms outstretched, barefoot, humming off-key and drinking root beer out of a wine glass because we hadn't unpacked the real ones yet. That shirt carried laughter. It carried the version of us we lost before we even realized we were letting go. I didn't say anything. I just held it up. And that's when she stopped smiling. Not out of guilt. I don't think it was that. It was something else. Recognition, maybe. Like she was reminded I had been there too. That her joy and her history hadn't existed in a vacuum. She didn't speak. Neither did I. But the stillness that settled into the courtroom was different now. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand attention, it invites it. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just felt. The judge glanced at me with a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. Not judgment. Not sympathy. Just awareness. And in that moment, I knew something shifted. Not in the outcome. The divorce would go through. She'd keep the house. I'd keep my name. And the rest would be divvied up in ink and signatures. But there's something sacred about being remembered in a moment where you were meant to be dismissed. I buttoned my shirt back up slowly. No grand gestures. No words. Just closure, or the beginning of it. We recessed for lunch shortly after. I stepped outside into the cool spring air, not sure if I wanted to scream or breathe, or just walk somewhere that didn't echo her perfume. And that's when her voice came from behind me, quieter than I'd ever heard it. Where did you find that? It wasn't anger. It wasn't even curiosity. It was more like someone asking about a place they once lived but hadn't thought about in years. I turned, but didn't smile. In the bottom drawer. The one you stopped opening. She nodded once, looked down, and said nothing else. That was the first time in months I saw her blink back something real. But I didn't need it to mean anything. Not anymore. Some people ask for apologies. Others hope for explanations. Me? I just wanted her to feel the weight of what we lost. Even if only for a second. That was enough. She didn't follow me outside. Not really. Sylvie stood by the column near the steps, arms folded tightly, like she wasn't sure if she was cold or just unprepared for the moment that had passed. I didn't expect her to say anything more. And honestly, I wasn't waiting for it. There are certain things in life you carry alone, even when someone else was there the whole time. The mistake I made, maybe the mistake we both made, was believing that memory meant the same thing to both of us. I sat on the edge of the concrete planter, the one with the half-dead bush, the sun casting lines across my shoes. I didn't look at her. I didn't ask why she laughed earlier, or what had changed in her eyes when she saw the shirt. I didn't need to. I already knew she had moved on. But she hadn't let go the same way I had. People think letting go is an event. A single day, a single word, a final scene. But I've learned it's not. It's small things. An unopened message. A photo frame quietly taken down. The moment you realize the voice in your head, the one you thought was theirs, is now just your own echo. That morning, I'd written something in my notebook. I wasn't planning to read it. Not aloud. Not to her. It was just for me. But as I sat there, I opened the page and stared at the words again, and it hit me harder than I expected. Some people don't leave you. They just stop standing where you last saw them. That was Sylvie. She didn't storm out of our marriage. She just stopped showing up. Slowly. Softly. Like steam slipping through a crack in the window. Gone before I noticed the room had cooled. I remember the last time she held my hand in public. I'd forgotten until that moment. A grocery store aisle. I had said something dumb about the way she always chose the same cereal, and she laughed, squeezed my hand, and called me predictable. I laughed too. It wasn't a special day. It wasn't an anniversary. Just a Tuesday, probably. But it stuck. The problem is, the brain is cruel like that. It remembers warmth more vividly than absence. The court clerk eventually came out and told us we had 10 minutes before we resumed. Sylvie nodded. She didn't look at me. I didn't look at her. Back inside, we returned to our sides of the table. Her attorney was typing something. Mine was reading a page I didn't care about. The judge hadn't returned yet. Then Sylvie did something she hadn't done in over a year. She looked straight at me. Not through me. Not around me. At me. And without smiling, without blinking too much, she quietly said, "I almost threw that shirt away." I didn't flinch. "I know," I replied. That's all we said. And somehow, it felt like the most honest thing we'd shared in years. We weren't angry anymore. We weren't married. We weren't even friends. We were two people who used to be important to each other, now just trying to find a clean way to turn the page. And yet, there was something about that moment that didn't quite let go of me. Because even silence can carry unfinished things. We resumed the hearing after lunch, but something had changed. Maybe not in the proceedings. The judge was the same. The room was the same. The chairs just as uncomfortable. But something between me and Sylvie felt heavier. Not dramatic. Not confrontational. Just like a curtain had been drawn back and neither of us liked what we saw standing on the stage. I kept glancing at her without meaning to. Not to catch her eye or read her face. I already knew what I needed to know. But I suppose part of me was still looking for the version of her I'd married. I don't think we talk enough about how hard it is to watch someone become unfamiliar while still looking exactly the same. Her face hadn't changed, but the way she carried herself had. There was an absence behind her eyes, like the lights in that house we used to share were still technically working, but no one had lived there in a long time. Her lawyer did most of the talking. Mine occasionally leaned in to whisper something, and I nodded more out of politeness than understanding. At that point, I wasn't trying to win. I didn't care about the sofa or the car or the weekend place we never actually finished furnishing. I just wanted out without forgetting who I was in the process. And that was harder than I expected, because I realized during that hearing that I hadn't just lost a wife. I'd also lost a version of myself that only ever existed when she was beside me. That's the part no one warns you about. You build this shared language, inside jokes, routines, that glance across a room that means let's go home, without saying a word. And then suddenly, it's like losing fluency in a language you helped create. You try to speak, but your words no longer land. You look at them and realize they don't need a translator anymore. They've moved on to a different dialect of living. The judge asked us both a series of standard questions. Do we understand the terms? Are we entering this agreement voluntarily? Is the marriage irretrievably broken? That last one hit me harder than I expected. Irretrievably. Not troubled, not distant, not damaged. Just broken. Permanently. Like something shattered on tile that no glue can fix, no matter how patient your hands are. Sylvie said yes. I said yes. The gavel didn't slam like it does in movies. It was more of a dull tap. And just like that, we weren't married anymore. We stood up, both adjusting our jackets at the same time, which made her smile for half a second, not at me, just at the coincidence of it. The courtroom cleared out slowly, and I waited for the others to leave first. I didn't want a hallway moment. I didn't want the awkward goodbye. But she didn't leave right away. She walked over, slowly, holding her purse against her ribs like a shield. She looked at me, really looked, for the first time in years. Do you think we gave up too soon? She asked. Not with guilt. Not with hope. Just with the kind of curiosity that lives in the spaces between what if and too late. I took a breath, not because I needed one, but because I was afraid of answering too fast. I think we gave up long before today. We just didn't say it out loud. She nodded, almost sadly. I think I stopped recognizing us somewhere around year 9. I wanted to say something comforting, something gentle. But instead, I asked, what were you laughing at earlier? Sylvie hesitated. Then she shrugged, not like she didn't know, but like she didn't want to say it. I wasn't laughing at you, she said. It was something my lawyer said. About the way you looked like you were about to give a speech. He said, he's either going to cry or confess to something heroic. I don't know why, it just caught me off guard. She paused, searching my face. But when you pulled out that shirt, it wasn't funny anymore. We stood there for a while in the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of all the things you didn't say when you had the chance. Eventually, she gave a small wave and turned to leave. I didn't follow. I didn't call out her name. I just watched her walk away with the same grace she always had, the kind that once made me feel like the world slowed down when she moved. And then I was alone. No ring. No promises. No more waiting for her keys in the lock or her shadow across the hallway at night. I walked out into the parking lot, got into my car, and just sat there with both hands on the wheel. No music. No destination. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. I just felt cleared out. Like someone had finally removed all the clutter from a room but hadn't yet decided what to fill it with. That, I think, is the true end. Not the signature. Not the gavel. But the moment you sit in your own silence and realize no one's coming home. The house didn't feel bigger after she left. It felt quieter in a way that didn't make sense, not just empty, but somehow delicate. Like the air inside had changed weight, and walking through the rooms might disturb something that was trying to settle. That first evening, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I just stood in the front hallway, holding my keys without remembering what I'd meant to do with them. Sylvie's shoes were gone, her mug on the counter was gone, but the faint smell of her shampoo still lived in the bathroom, like even the air hadn't been told she was finished here. I don't think people talk enough about the way loss rewires your daily habits. How silence becomes so dense it starts to hum. I sat on the edge of the couch that night, eating toast over a paper towel and realizing I didn't know what I liked to watch on my own. Every show we'd ever played in the background suddenly felt like it belonged to her. At one point, I found myself in the laundry room, just standing there, staring at the empty dryer like maybe she'd left something by accident. A sock. A note. A small sign that this wasn't permanent. There was nothing. Only the dryer sheet tucked in the corner, lavender, her favorite scent, and I felt ridiculous for even noticing. But it hit me then. This was the beginning of after. Not a clean break. Not a dramatic walkout. Just the quiet continuation of life without her. No event. No conclusion. Just me. Breathing, moving, existing in a space that used to feel shared and now echoed back only my own voice. I didn't feel free. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt misplaced. Like I was still standing in the same spot, but the floor plan of my life had shifted without warning. I didn't call anyone. Not my brother, not my coworkers. I wasn't avoiding people, I just didn't know what I'd say. We signed the papers. She said one last thing and left. And now the fridge still has her almond milk. Who would know how to respond to that? So I just walked. Around the block. No headphones. No direction. I passed the neighbor's hydrangeas, still blooming even though it was too early in the season. Past the old mailbox that we used to joke about replacing. Past the empty house at the corner, its windows still taped from when the storm blew through last spring. Everything looked exactly the same. Except me. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from remembering what used to fill the space. And no matter how deep you breathe or how long you sleep, it lingers in the quiet ways. I came back home and sat at the kitchen table. I didn't turn on the lights again. I just sat there until the sun dipped enough to make the room dark. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't scroll through old photos or try to piece together what went wrong. Not because I didn't care, but because I already knew the answer. We stopped seeing each other. Not physically, emotionally. She started laughing less. I stopped asking why. She got quieter in the mornings. I said nothing. She started staying late at work. I told myself it was normal. She drifted. I let her. And when she left, there was no storm. Just the slow, gentle exhale of something that had already been gone for a while. That night, I opened the window. The air was cool. Familiar. For the first time in a long time, I didn't wonder where she was. I just let the silence in. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like truth. The strange thing is, you don't realize how many things are shared until there's no one else to ask. Like, where do the extra light bulbs go? Did we ever fix that drawer in the hallway? Was the yellow scarf hers or her sister's? The answers don't matter, not really. But the questions, they keep showing up. Uninvited. Small reminders that you were once part of a shared language, and now you're talking to yourself in it. I started going through closets. Not because I needed to, just because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. The coat closet had an umbrella I'd never seen before. Her initials weren't on it. It didn't smell like her perfume. It was just unfamiliar. And that scared me more than finding something that belonged to her. The unfamiliar meant she had whole parts of herself I never touched. I sat on the floor with it, like an idiot, umbrella across my lap, wondering who it belonged to, if it even mattered. It probably didn't. But when you're left with silence, your mind starts inventing echoes. I opened a box labeled miscellaneous and found a shoelace, a postcard from a city neither of us had been to, and an old grocery list written in my handwriting but with her corrections. Not almond milk. Oat. You forget every time. She'd drawn a little arrow next to it. That note, it wrecked me more than any fight we ever had. Because it was the kind of thing people write when they still believe you're coming back from the store. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just folded the paper and slipped it into my wallet without really knowing why. I guess we all carry one small thing we don't need but can't throw away. A few nights later, I tried cooking something new. I don't know what made me do it. Probably boredom. Maybe pride. Maybe because I needed to prove to myself that I could exist beyond the habits we'd built together. It was a mushroom risotto, something she used to make on quiet Sundays. I didn't follow her recipe. I didn't even look it up. I just went by memory. It tasted wrong. Not terrible. Just not familiar. And that somehow hurt more than if I'd burned the whole thing. Because it meant I remembered just enough to try, but not enough to get it right. After dinner, I sat in the dim light of the living room, just watching the way the shadows moved on the wall. I didn't turn the TV on. Didn't check the clock. Time didn't feel like something I was part of. It just moved past me like a parade I wasn't invited to anymore. I wondered what she was doing. Not in a longing way, more like the way you wonder what the weather's like in a city you once visited. You don't plan on going back. You're just curious if it still rains the same way there. That night, I dreamed of nothing. Just dark. No sounds. No images. Like my mind had finally run out of footage to replay. And for the first time, that didn't scare me. It felt like a beginning that didn't need an audience. Just me, the dark, and the quiet agreement that life goes on even when you're not quite ready to meet it halfway. I stopped rearranging things. There was a phase right after the divorce where I kept moving furniture. A chair to a different corner. A lamp facing the window instead of the wall. I told myself it was about light, angles, fresh air, but it wasn't. I just didn't want the place to look like a life she had walked out of. I needed it to feel new, like it belonged to someone else. But you can only pretend for so long. Now, I leave everything where it lands. A jacket on the stair railing. A book on the coffee table. A pair of socks under the bed. I used to hear her voice in my head every time I passed those things. You always forget the little messes. But lately, that voice has been quiet. I don't know if that's healing or just forgetting. What surprised me more than anything was how normal some things remained. The mail still arrived every afternoon. The dog next door still barked at squirrels. My barista still spelled my name, Lowell, on the cup, even though I've corrected her 3 times. And I still make the same mistake every time I cook rice: too much water, not enough patience. The world didn't pause just because my marriage ended. I started writing my name again, just to see how it looked. On scrap paper. On napkins. Nothing formal. It's strange how foreign your own handwriting can feel when it's not shared on notes stuck to the fridge. There's a bench near the lake where I go now. Not every day, but enough to call it a habit. I sit there with coffee and no phone, just watching people I'll never meet walking past in pairs, in groups, alone, with strollers, with music in their ears, in mid-conversation or mid-silence. No one knows what I've been through. No one asks. And for once, I don't feel like I need them to. It's peaceful, not being known. The other day, I saw an older couple sitting 2 benches away. He was reading, she was feeding birds. They didn't talk much. But when she stood up, he held out his hand like it was automatic. She took it, steady and slow. They walked off together without a word. I didn't feel envy. I didn't feel regret. I just watched. And then I finished my coffee and threw the cup away. That's all. That's what this chapter is now, noticing things, and not needing to turn them into meaning. Letting life exist without asking it for answers. When I got home that night, I stood at the sink and watched the water run over a plate I didn't remember using. I didn't dry it. Just left it in the rack. Then I turned off the light and went to bed with the window open. It was just a Tuesday, but it didn't hurt. Not even a little. Spring came back quietly this year. Not like before, when it would arrive with a flood of plans and reminders, brunches, birthdays, backyard projects half finished and half promised. This time it just slipped in through the open window, scenting the air with damp earth and the faint sweetness of grass warmed for the first time in months. I didn't mark it on a calendar. I just noticed I wasn't wearing a jacket one morning, and it didn't feel like anything was missing. I still walk past the lake sometimes, though I've stopped checking the time. I bring a book I never quite finish. Lately I just end up watching the light on the water, how it flickers without needing to prove anything. There's something comforting about that, how beautiful things don't try to be noticed. They just are. A woman sat beside me on the bench once. She was older, maybe 60, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a loose braid. She didn't talk much. Just gave me a quiet smile and pointed to my cup. Good place for coffee, she said. I nodded. Best in town. That was it. Just a moment between strangers. But for some reason, I remembered it later, not because it meant anything, but because it didn't have to. That's what healing looks like, I think. Not some dramatic change. Not a new version of yourself that's unrecognizable. Just learning to let the present be enough. The house is still quiet. I like it that way now. There's space for music, for humming in the kitchen, for dancing with no rhythm while eggs sizzle on Sunday mornings. I've moved the chair back where it used to be. Not because I miss her, but because I like the way the light hits it there. Sometimes I find things I thought I'd thrown away. Notes scribbled in the margins of old cookbooks. A single glove in the drawer by the door. They don't sting anymore. They just remind me that love happened here once. And that's not a tragedy, it's a memory with soft edges. Sylvie hasn't called. I haven't, either. And there's nothing heavy about that. We shared a chapter. It ended. Some books don't need sequels. This morning, I planted herbs by the window. Basil, thyme, a little mint I'll probably forget to use. I don't know why it felt important, but it did. Something about new roots. About tending to something that might grow, even if only for a season. Later, I poured coffee into my favorite mug and stepped outside barefoot. It was early. The sky hadn't decided whether to be blue or gold yet. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't carrying anything. No regrets. No unfinished conversations. No versions of myself I needed to become. Just this life, quiet, ordinary, and completely mine. And it was enough.